are times when a mentor can negate, destroy mentoring. That's something that Doug and I have been exploring because some people have been asking us questions about that. So we went around and started digging, and then we started asking people ourselves, what are the ways in which you can negate, destroy the mentoring arrangement? And being that Doug is a great practitioner in mentoring, and I tend to do more of an education role, we thought that we would get together and just share a video here. And we've got 3 today that we want to go over. Sometimes they're the ones that come to the foreground the most. And we thought that through the international mentoring community, it would be a great way to record our thoughts, share those with you, and you can pick them up and find ways that you don't negate or destroy a mentoring arrangement. And that's where we're going with this today. So Doug's with TalentC. We are co-founders of the international mentoring community. I'm with Wealth Movement. And I would hazard to share that we're a legacy project in motion. And I say hazard to share because I've never said that to Doug before until today. And I thought that I would say that as a way in which to frame up why we're getting together and sharing. So it's not so much from the certification of mentor. It's more about let's get some ideas out there about mentoring, and let's really help move the mentor practices along. And so I said to Doug, hey, today's the day. We're going to shoot another video, and we're going to get going, and we're going to get 2024 rocking and rolling. Boy, I haven't said that phrase in a long time. Get that up and going and enjoy ourselves in this world of mentorship, mentoring, and mentor. Now, with that, Doug, you know that we are just going to share the basics here, but I think it's important for people just to get a little bit more of your background in terms of you as a practitioner. You want to share a little bit about that?
I started TalentC in 2009. The original idea behind it was, number one, there was a market niche that needed to be addressed, which was the training of mentors and the certification of mentors and so on. So long story short, I started down that path, and then eventually after a number of years, you and our paths kind of intersected and we continued on with tweaks and fine-tuning and a whole bunch of other great things with mentor certification. So I'm the practitioner in the team of 2, so to speak, and I'm very heavily or very actively involved in the mentoring of people. And more so now, I've had a bit of a shift where I now spend quite a bit of time in the mental health, mental well-being, grief. I'm part of some support groups where I help facilitate the dialogue that we need and help people with their healing journey more so than anything else.
Okay, well, great. Well, thanks very much. And I'll share a little bit more about the education work that's coming up a little bit later. But let's get into these. These 3, these are the ones that seem to be surfacing through our conversations with others. And we'll be working up, okay, what might the list look like? We're aiming to get to 10, just one of those numbers that people use. So we'll see how it goes. But here's 3. And they're a lack of commitment, poor communication, and ignoring boundaries. So let's tackle the first one, the lack of commitment. So this would have to be on behalf of the mentor, but I believe the mentee plays a little bit of a role in this commitment story. So what is it, or how is it that a mentor could blow up a mentoring arrangement through the lack of commitment? What are your thoughts there, Doug?
Well, I think the main thing that can happen is that they become completely disengaged from the mentoring relationship and they find reasons not to engage. And so they sort of feed off of what the mentee is is doing. And I've had that happen more often than I care to admit, where I've had a mentee that wasn't engaged, wasn't establishing contact and all of that sort of stuff. And so I would get to a point where I just went, okay, when you need me, call me. And that's not the way that I like to do mentoring. I like to be, let's establish some goals and objectives, and let's talk about them regularly so that we don't lose sight of them. So if I'm not committed, the relationship isn't going to go anywhere. And I don't mean that, from the aspect of if it wasn't for me, nothing would get done. What I'm getting at is that if I don't drive the bus, we're not going to be going anywhere. And it's a two-way trusted relationship.
Oh, for sure. And I think that another word to sort of put into the mix here is, or maybe it's a phrase, commitment is really about promise keeping. So if you're a mentor, you're making a promise into the mentoring arrangement, you're asking the same of the mentee in return. And if something happens and you have to break that promise, then there's a recommitment that has to get made with an explanation. But really, it's if you're going to invest that time in a mentoring arrangement, why would you get to a point where you have a lack of commitment? That was one of the questions that sort of was always in the back of my mind. There must be something else that is going on. And I think it comes back to some of the other areas that we're talking about that sort of get in the way, the other ways things get negated. But this notion of commitment, that's a word I really hold near and dear to myself. I use this phrase, communicate from commitment. So if I'm going to do commitment, from that commitment, I'm going to communicate. And that's how it unfolds for me. That's what makes the greatest sense. Not only when I'm mentoring, but also if I'm doing consulting or coaching or instructing or whatever. That's really an important element of it. So if we're going to have these meaningful mentoring arrangements, and I've mentioned communication already, others have said where it blows up, poor communication. So from a mentor, poor communication, again, I believe there's a flip side to this from the mentee's perspective. But what are your thoughts on the mentor through poor communication, negating the mentoring arrangement? Thoughts there?
Where I notice it the most is when you start to work in the mental health space. And it's really important that you know how to communicate. And so you take advantage of the tools that we talk about quite often: active listening and hearing, non-judgmental, confidential. All of those things have to be in place in order for the relationship to thrive. And for, coming back to the mental health piece again, is that, in order to be able to help somebody on their healing journey, you have to understand what their journey is and how you can fit into that to be able to help them move forward, and to be able to communicate the aspect of, I really do care about you and your well-being. And, if you need somebody to talk to, just let me know, and all those sorts of things. But it would be like taking a great big ball of tape and wrapping it around somebody to protect them as much as you can, and how you communicated what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it. That's of the utmost importance, especially in the mental health space.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull two ideas in here. One is communication is about the coordinating the behavior of another. And that came out of some research that I was doing many, many years ago. And I can't remember the actual authors of it at the moment. So I want to make sure to credit them, and I'll find it and I'll put it in the show more notes. But the second one is this notion of wholeheartedness that Brene Brown talks about. And I always bring those to the foreground. If I'm going to communicate, then I'm communicating in a way that is going to coordinate the person I'm interacting with. So if we are in a mentoring arrangement, there is a certain amount of coordination, right? A certain amount of, well, these are the things that are going to happen from a behavior point of view. So you are coordinating it when you're sharing, obviously the mentee in return. But to enter that communication now with the wholeheartedness, the sort of take what you're sharing there, you're mentioning mental health. I deal olders to elders and the area of legacy. And there's a lot about communication in there. There's a lot about mentoring that goes on in there as well. So I can see where a person, if you don't understand what communication's about, you might fall into, well, I think I'm communicating already. It's got to be the mentee's problem, not mine. And then that's when you have to sort of look in the mirror and go, oh, hang on a minute. There's something going on here, and I think I may be the one who's bringing it to the foreground, right?
I think that one of the, certainly in the grief space, one of the common things that I hear, and I just heard it here last couple of days, was the aspect of, I don't know what to say. So I'm going to meet with this friend of mine, and they've just lost a loved one. I don't know what to say. Oh, sometimes not me, but in the examples that I was referring to, that person will say something that they probably should not have said, because it makes the situation, it amplifies or magnifies, makes it worse. It's like I had a personal experience where it was for when we did a celebration of life for my wife Deborah, and I had people that I hadn't seen in years come up to me and say, geez, we're really sorry and everything else. We should get together for a coffee or a lunch. That was 2 years ago.
Have they done it?
Nope.
Okay. So to your point, they're communicating something, but they're not backing up their behavior, so to speak.
Yeah. No commitment.
Yeah. And no commitment. That's a good point. Yeah, it's something we have to remember when we walk into commitment and communication, right? Communicate from commitment. That's why I wanted to bring those two forward for folks, is when you mentor, pay attention to that. And if you do, you're not going to blow up your mentoring arrangement. But if you find yourself slipping, then you may have to make a recommitment, or you're going to have to look at the words you're using. Sometimes, and I have my own stories that I could share. Sometimes when I get into a mentoring arrangement, some of my words tend to have a little bit of academicness to them. Well, that's where I came out of. I did a lot of mentoring when I was a professor at university. And so sometimes, in a way, I just sort of slip into it until I go, oh, hang on a minute, get out of there, right? It isn't helping at this point in time. So those are two right now, and I think we'll go over the third one. So the notion of lack of commitment and poor communication. The next one is ignoring boundaries. Now, this one I think is something that slips in really quickly, and I'll give a really good example, and Doug can sort of expand upon that, is knowing where the line is, mentoring and counseling. For example, there's a boundary of mentoring. There's a boundary when it comes to the notion of, do you coach? Do you instruct? Do you train while you're mentoring? And what I always share with people is, if you're going to go to a different education approach, just because you can doesn't mean you should. But if you are, make sure that it's one that you can do with a level of commitment that goes with that education approach. And sometimes regulations might say, no, you're not there, you can't go there. And I'll have Doug explain a little bit more about that in a second. But this notion of knowing the boundaries is really important. And so for me, I think of it sort of like as a map. okay, I've got a map of what it is that we're going to do, and we're working within that with our arrangement. If we're starting to go outside of that map, maybe there's some corrections that have to get made. Maybe we have to draw a new map. All right, I'm just using it as a metaphor at this point in time. But Doug, you got a really excellent example when it comes to mentoring and counseling, grief, kind of idea. You want to share that storyline?
Well, before we go there, one of the things I wanted to talk about or mention was the whole thing of liability and how you can be placing yourself in a position of being liable, but you can also have an impact on the liability of the person you're mentoring. And, that can be looking at it from the aspect of, if I'm mentoring you and you say, why don't you come to my house, we'll have a cup of tea and we can continue talking there. That's a no-go, and that's a liability that you don't want to get yourself into.
Unless your business is built out of your home.
Exactly.
I think that's it. And when people mention that, I always go, oh, hang on a minute. Not everyone is going to the office nowadays, right? So I think it'd be worth just mentioning that. Yeah, but keep going. Thoughts?
So the regulation one is, I'm just trying to refresh my memory here.
The line of counseling and mentoring.
Yes. So I've had situations where I have been working with somebody and the relationship has shifted very quickly, in fact, from mentoring to coaching. And because there was a mental health flavor to it, it got into the counseling side of things as well. And so what I've been working very diligently at making sure there's separation there between all the different lines in the sand. But for me, what I'm trying to do is create, not only am I working towards mentoring being part of the support structure for mental health, but I'm also looking at it and starting to get more and more buy-in where people, and the best way is for me to give an example is that today I go see my psychiatrist and then he says, come back and see me in 6 months. That's when my next available time is. And so who do I go to if I'm experiencing difficulties? Who do I go to? And the idea behind the mentoring part is that your mentor will be walking with you on your journey, your healing journey, and they can be there as a support for you, but the mentor has to make sure that they are, they're cognizant of the boundaries and that they don't cross over. And your basic function is to listen and hear what the person you're mentoring, to listen and hear what it is that they're saying, and then to be able to just help them deal with what's going on in their life. And it's a lot of times, in fact, the majority of the times, it's all about listening and hearing.
Yeah, so one of the things that we can bring to the foreground right now is this notion of journey mentor. It's something that Doug and I have been working on, creating through the international mentoring community. So a journey mentor, when you are doing a journey mentor approach, what does that look like, feel like? So because there's lack of commitment, poor communication, ignoring boundaries, if you're going to be a journey mentor, you don't want to do these three things. So what is a journey mentor? So people might just understand that term.
So when we created that a number of years ago, it was created for two reasons. The first was to be an assistance to mentors who wanted to go through the certification process. That was number one. So it would be a guide to guide people through getting their either one of the two certifications. You could actually go either one. The second part was that we wanted to see us create a mentoring certification with a focus or flavor on mental health, mental well-being. And so the Journey Mentor, that's what it was created, primarily was created for helping people who are going on their healing journey and being able to, and you're able to provide a much deeper, richer mentoring experience just because of, the things like you had said, if you're a journey mentor, you definitely wouldn't be dealing with a lack of commitment, poor communication, or ignoring boundaries, and the list goes on from there. You wouldn't be dealing with that because those are all best practices that the journey mentor should be working with without any question.
Yeah. So with the international mentoring community, what we've done is we said, okay, there is 2 certifications. One is the Certificate of Practice Journey Mentor. The other one is the Certificate of Completion. If that's something that you need, we can give you that document, but we prefer to go and complete the Certificate of Practice Journey Mentor. That's where we're going. So we actually came to synthesize everything we're doing into that one certificate. And another day we'll explain a little bit more. But I think what's important right now is just to acknowledge is that you can, wherever you are in your life, create an approach, a legacy approach using mentoring or mentoring to support your legacy approach. Whatever way it is, as you listen into this, think about the ways in which mentoring is of value and how you can take up the mantle of journey mentor and be able to support whether you're still employed, you're making a transition from employment into years, your next 50, or maybe you're in your next 50 and you're looking for ways to leverage your experience. If you think about what Doug is doing in the mental health area, there's lots of room for mentors in that area. And that's one of the areas you could certainly talk to Doug a lot about. If you want to learn about the Journey Mentor and the education that goes with it, we've got a Mentoring Now course and program that's coming up. I wrote a book called Mentoring Now. Doug wrote a book, You're Not Alone. He's working on his next one. I'm working on my next one. So I think Doug and I are bringing quite a bit to the table here that we can help you out. And so you can direct message us through wherever you see this video. You can reach out through our websites. So whatever way is comfortable for you to get a hold of us, we would be happy to have a conversation. If you're looking at the certification route, then there is a place to go grab the self-assessment, complete your self-assessment. There's an explanation that goes with that. So again, with this video, subscribe, comment, share, whatever the kind of ways in which you would celebrate this video. And I think, Doug, we've sort of covered off, but as I always do, what's something that you think is really important to remember because of what we shared today?
For me, it's how important good communication is in a mentoring arrangement. And that's the difference between a great relationship or arrangement and one that's not so great. And think of the outcomes that you get from both.
Yeah, and I think that what that does is it certainly reminds us how important commitment, communication, boundaries is about. A little slip, destroy things. Really leverage in and make sure that those are working well. Great experience, excellent experience, extraordinary experience, whatever words you want to use to go with that. So again, Doug, thanks very much. I think what we'll do is we'll dig into those other responses that we've got. We're looking to sort of put 10 together. So once we got another 3 that we think are pretty solid, we'll come back and fire up the video again, record it and get it up here on the International Mentoring Community channel. So with that, Doug, I think we'll say take care and catch you later.
All right, take care.